Hello and welcome to the 3PGC webinar. The Three Principles Global Community, also known as 3PGC, is a nonprofit organization that's committed to bringing an understanding of the three principles to people throughout the world. You can learn more about 3PGC at 3pgc.org. And today we have Dr. Amy Johnson with us. Amy Johnson, PhD, is a psychologist and life coach who works with clients worldwide through individual coaching, workshops, and retreats. She's an author of Being Human, Essays on Thought Mares, Bouncing Back, and Your True Nature, and The Little Bit of Big Change, The No-Willpower Approach to Breaking Any Habit, which is her new book that just came out in January. Johnson has been a regularly featured expert on The Steve Harvey Show and Oprah.com, as well as in the Wall Street Journal and Self Magazine. She devotes a large portion of her coaching practice to helping people understand the psycho-spiritual principles that explain all human behavior and helping people end unwanted habits. You can learn more about Amy Johnson at www.dramyjohnson.com, and I highly recommend signing up for her newsletter because her weekly blogs are really fabulous. So Amy, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to you.
All right. Thank you, Bonnie. I'm excited to be here. And first, I just want to put it out there just to get it off my mind that I do have a bit of a cold at the moment. So I apologize for any nose blowing or coughing or excessive water guzzling that you see, because I'm sure it's going to happen. But it's all good because, you know, we're all human and we've all experienced it. So I'll just, now I can say that and just let that leave my mind and just focus on the talk. So I wanted to talk a little bit here about some of just what I've seen and the principles and the work I do with people and what has really been really life-changing, like in so many ways, really life-changing for me personally, and maybe tell a little bit of my story and kind of start there, and then kind of how I see all this and share it with people. And I don't remember exactly what the title of this was that I gave, but I know it's along the lines of the brain. So kind of looking at how our brain works and kind of knowing, you know, that our brain is a machine. Obviously, you know, it's just a machine in our heads. And that's one of the things that I love about this understanding of the principles is that it's so like just infinitely bigger than the brain. And it really kind of looks at, you know, what it puts our physicalness, but this understanding is that it's so much bigger than anything that we see. So much bigger than anything that we experience. And it, for me, just really helped put all that into perspective. And I think that's what it does for everyone, probably for a lot of people, is that, you know, as human beings, it's natural. It's what's going to happen that we get super caught up in what we see and what we experience. And especially what we're seeing and experiencing day in and day out that we don't like. You know, think about any kind of bad habit, any kind of emotion or just feeling state that doesn't feel good to us, that keeps coming back to us over and over again. Of course, we're going to focus there. Of course, we're going to look there and call it a problem and want to change it and want to fix it. I mean, that's like, it's just where our attention goes. But what I love so much about this understanding is just seeing, wow, our attention's going to go there. That doesn't have to radically change overnight, but I know why it's going there. I know that I'm a human being. I'm part of this physical universe. And that's just the way my mind works, is I tend to focus on what I don't like and try to fix it. But there are other options. You know, we don't have to stay in that place and scramble and think and try to work everything out. You know, there are other options. So a little bit about kind of how I came into this, or when this really started to land with me. I've been a coach for quite a while, but I was caught up in a binge eating habit that lasted for the better part of 8 years, and was really, you know, it's interesting, like any habit, I think it felt really debilitating at times, very, very limiting. It was something that felt like this cloud that kind of hung over my life. And yet at the same time, I had an awesome life. So it was like, you know, like any of us, we have these things that linger, but at the same time, like the clouds would shift, and I can remember all kinds of wonderful moments in the midst of this, and feeling really free and wonderful and doing good things in life. But then there was this thing, it felt like it. That's how I felt, it was almost like this black cloud that kind of followed. And sometimes it would be pretty bad and I couldn't really see my way around it. And other times it would feel like it was kind of further behind me. But even when it felt further behind me, even when I would have weeks, maybe even a month of kind of relative freedom from it, I wasn't really free of it because my mind was keeping it alive, because I was told, by innocent, well-meaning professionals that this was a disorder. It was in a book. I fit all the criteria. And if you want to get out of that book and off of that list, if you want to knock off some of those criteria and be free of this, you need to go to lots of therapy. Like, this needs to be your experience. You need to go for this long without binge eating or whatever it is. And so, and I was also told that, I don't know if I was told this, but this is what I heard, was that this was kind of a big part of me. My brain was conditioned in such a way that my brain was going to do this. And this was it was not all of me, but it was a pretty sticky part of me. And then I could kind of learn to cope with it. But being free of it, no one really talked about that. Being completely free of it to where it just was a non-issue. No one ever talked, or I didn't hear it. Maybe they talked about it, but I couldn't even hear that. I was so I have this issue. That when it would kind of lie dormant or just leave me alone, or now I know when I was just in my own, clarity, I wasn't really, because I kind of knew, okay, it's going to come back at some point. I'm just getting a break, but it'll be back. And so I kind of lived like that for 8 years. And so I came across at one point, right around the same time that I was first hearing about the principles and learning this wonderful understanding, I read a book by a woman named Catherine Hansen called Brain Over Binge that really was about kind of the brain-based scientific understanding of binge eating. And it was very simple in the science of it. And it basically just talked about how our brain, the part of our brain that's involved in habits and addictions and anything that we kind of do over and over again, that stuff that kind of compels us and just pulls us in without our awareness over and over again. That's something that we can kind of call the lower brain. It's just this part of the brain that everyone has. And it's very machine-like. It's very, very simple. It's very easily programmed. Kind of programmed is a kind of a weird word, but it latches on to patterns and, just wants to be efficient. It's just a machine doing the best it can with what it has. And there's not a ton of wisdom in that in itself. It's a very smart machine in that it kind of follows the rules of the machine, but that's about it. And so what I kind of got from the science understanding, I read that book and I started to read work by like Jeffrey Schwartz, who does a lot of work with OCD patients. And what they were all kind of saying is that when we can kind of come to understand how our brain works and see, oh, that's just that part of the brain doing what it does, there's a lot of room for people to kind of get some freedom from that. You get that space. And you can see how that would be the case. If before it was like, oh, I'm doing this feeling's back, I have to go back and do my habitual behavior, or I'm getting pulled into this, or if you're an OCD person, why am I, I have no choice here. I have to flip the lights on and off 20 times, or whatever it is. You're so kind of consumed with that, or you feel so kind of overtaken by our own thinking. We don't see it as thinking. We just see this as what I'm going to do, So we just fall into it, and it starts to feel so personal and so meaningful and so like there's no other way out. And the tension that grows when those urges to do your thing, come up, there's a tension there, and it's very uncomfortable, especially when you don't understand it. So with no understanding like this, we feel that tension growing, and then that's just more proof of this horrible disorder that you have, that you have no way of really getting yourself out of. And so it just grows and grows and grows to this horrible feeling. And then you want to do the habit even more, because at least that's a way to feel better for a second, So it's really easy. It became really easy to see how people can get and how I was so caught up in just this habit and this habitual stuff that now I see was just thought coming up, being brought to life within me, and not noticing the fact that it actually comes up as all thought does, shows up, it's brought to life by consciousness, and then it changes. And it goes on like that our entire lives. Every single thing. It's thought brought to life, and then it shifts. Different thought brought to life, and then it shifts. Maybe that old thought again brought to life, and then it shifts, and getting a feel for like how that movement is always happening. We're never stuck in anything. And it doesn't feel like that when you don't see this. So anyway, so kind of seeing how the brain works. So what, Jeffrey Schwartz has done with a lot of his in a lot of his studies is take these people that are caught up in OCD tendencies and stuff, where they're washing their hands 50 times or checking the door lock 50 times, and helping them see this isn't you. You aren't your brain. This is just one little tiny part of your brain that's telling you over and over again, do this, do this, do this. And when we don't see it's just one little tiny part of our brain, we just do it because it feels bad and it's telling us to, and we think we're our thoughts. And so of course you just do it. But what he was seeing, is just a very basic understanding, like teaching people a very basic understanding that you aren't wanting to turn the lights on and off 50 times. Your brain's just telling you to, and you don't have to do that. Your brain's going to tell you that because that's what your brain does these days. But if you see that as, oh, that's just my brain telling me to do this, that's just the habit, and I'm not going to do that, then it's like, then we kind of connect with us and what I think of as more as, of like our true nature. Then there's that space there where all kinds of thinking can occur. Our brains can tell us all kinds of things, but we don't have to go with it. We don't have to do it because, now we know, oh, there's a space there. And if this is leading me in this direction I don't like, just wait, because it's going to go away. It's going to change and fade. So for me, like I would have these urges to binge eat, and it just felt so hijacking and overwhelming that I thought there's no way this is going to go away on its own. I just have to hurry up and eat and make it go away. And then that kind of keeps that cycle going. But what I saw in that initial kind of brain explanation of it was that's not true. I have these huge, overwhelming, hijacking feeling urges. The reason they feel so huge and overwhelming brain language is because the part of the brain that's giving me these urges is very close to the part that keeps us alive. It's kind of like that. It gives you like that fight or flight sort of feeling. So again, it's your brain doing the best it can to keep you alive. It thinks this habit is kind of helpful for you. It helps you feel better. So it's brought to you, the feelings of it are brought to you with such intensity that it feels like life or death. And anyone who's ever been really caught up in a habit or addiction can probably attest to that. I mean, you can know better all you want, but the feeling of it, like until you really deeply see it, the feeling of it, it feels really overwhelming and kind of like a matter of life and death. And if you don't know any better, of course, you're just going to fall in, do your habit, make that bad feeling go away, and then come back to home base. And so when I saw, wait a minute, when this feeling comes up, I don't have to eat to make it go away. I can hang out. I'm still me. I'm still safe. I'm in here. And that feeling is going to come and it's also going to go away. That was like mind blowing to me. And it still, when I work with people, it's mind blowing to them a lot too. And it's so funny because you kind of look after the fact and you're like, well, why? Of course it's going to go away. Like I always tell people, like, you've never been stuck in a feeling for life, have you? I mean, at the worst, I don't know what the length of time is, but we can feel kind of stuck in feelings, and we can definitely have feelings that linger longer than we'd like them to, but everything changes. No one's ever been stuck in anything forever. And everyone's like, duh, of course. But it doesn't feel like that when you're in it. It doesn't feel like that. For me, at least, it took seeing that being pointed out to me several times to see, oh yeah, that big feeling that comes up, it's going to go away just like every other feeling that comes up goes away. So that little basic understanding gave me enough of a window. It just gave me a little bit of insight. It was like a buffer there where I could start to feel all kinds of stuff, feel those urges come up, and just know something about them. Okay, I don't have to follow that path. This is just me experiencing something that's a fleeting feeling, and it's going to go away. And that was enough for me anyway, for that habit to just basically just go away. And it went away. Again, I've noticed that it's been several years now. So I notice that as the length of time increases, the more my memory, it feels like, oh, it just went away. And I know it didn't just vanish overnight, but it was relatively quick and painless. It was simply just insight that I just kind of saw it in a new way, and it just didn't affect me the same. And so that did kind of go away, I guess, relatively quickly and easily. And kind of around that time, I was learning about the principles. And then that just, like, it was like rocket fuel for the brain stuff that I was seeing, because it was almost like, okay, I kind of feel like, all right, I kind of see how my brain works now. And my brain doesn't have to lead me around like a dog on a leash, like my brain's not in charge here. I'm still me. But understanding the principles, like, it's like I had risen, 50,000 feet and was looking down on it from this whole new perspective, because principles being so far before and beyond this little physical thing that was happening just gave it so much more depth. So I could kind of see, oh, that's why, now I can see why it's really true that, your lower brain might jump up and scream and cause a fit, but then it's going to quiet down. Well, in the bigger picture, that's because that's what everything physical does in life, right? Like, this energy comes through us, it brings things to life. And then I always think of waves. It's like the momentum of the ocean brings the water, it creates a big crash on the shore, and then it goes back to the source. And that's how life is always happening. So it was like, oh, that's why we're talking about the brain working in this way. It goes way beyond the brain. This is like a bigger framework for just every single thing in life ever. And some of the things I started to notice just for myself, my own life, was that just those shifts that I think a lot of people in this understanding notice, where, oh, other things don't bother me in the same way either. Isn't that interesting? It's I'm onto it. When I get caught up and feel like I'm getting kind of tangled in my own head, which happens all the time, there's something there that just sort of wakes me up to it a little quicker, and seeing all of that. So it was really cool to see. I love seeing this in people I talk with. Their habits fall away, but then so bigger than that, so much bigger than that, because they see it in all these other little pieces of their life. Suddenly there's just an understanding that makes sense, and that makes our feelings feel safe. And that's my favorite Sid Banks quote, my favorite quote ever. And it's in the beginning of my new book, is the one about, if we could all just not be afraid of our experience, that alone would change the world. And I just, like, that's true. Duh, I know we all know, everyone watching knows that's true. But that's really true. If you think about that, that is so profound, that as we feel, and it's not even never being afraid of our experience, because I'm still afraid of my experience all the time at times, but there's just a safety that starts to come up, I think, in this understanding, when you can see, okay, I might have a brain that's going down this path, or I might be pulled in this direction, or this dark cloud might feel like it's coming over me regularly. But the less I hang out in that and try to fix that and make sense of that, and the more I just look to what's always true, like that dark cloud, that habit, that whatever it is, it's just one little kind of manifestation of mind, right? Of universal energy coming to life within us. It's one little manifestation. And if it's like one little wave, well, that might be one little wave, or it might be one huge hurricane wave. But either way, it comes up, crashes, and goes back. And I think there's just such a sense of safety in that for people, where it just, we don't have to stare at the problem. We don't have to fix the problem. There's nothing wrong with us. There was never anything wrong. We didn't come out damaged. We didn't become damaged from our childhood or our parents or any of that. It's just that we experience totally normal, totally safe human stuff. And we, in our innocence, take it really seriously and stare at it. And the way that works is, the more you take it seriously and don't understand it and stare at it, just the machine in our head is going to note that and give you more of it. it's just the way a machine works, that's set up in that way. So kind of having that framework, I just think is so helpful, and there's so much relief in it and so much safety. And what I love to see, I'm just so grateful for this, and so glad that I get to see this play out with people every day. I'm not kidding. Like the I don't know how to say, I don't want to say the results or the success that I see with clients, because I don't take any credit for this, but I just know. And again, I'm in awe of it still, but I know a lot of people listening that are very familiar with this understanding, like this is just what we see. Like, this is incredible. And it really, really helps people and has an effect on people so much bigger than anything I had ever seen or experienced before, and for a lot of people, I mean, it does that. So it just makes me so grateful for this problem that came up in my life, and that I don't know, if I had never had that issue, maybe I had never kind of come across this. And that's something that I love to share with people too, because again, so human. Of course, we all have these problems and we just can't see anything good in them, and we just can't until we can. But once people start to get a little bit of that freedom, it is kind of easy to look back and say, oh, well, maybe this was a blessing. Maybe I had to have this kind of stumbling block so that it could open me up to a new way of seeing things that not just solved this problem. That's the cool thing. It's not like talking about the principles just solves people's problem of the moment. I mean, you don't forget this stuff. You take it with you into the rest of your life, and everything can change. So that's just a little bit of my story, and just how I love to talk about this kind of stuff with people. And I really think it's helpful, and not for everyone. Sometimes I just talk about, most of the time, I just talk about where our experience comes from and how these principles work together to bring us that experience. And no matter what the experience is, it's the same thing always and only. And just staying with the simplicity of it is really, really nice and really, really easy. That it's only one thing. And whether it's a hijacking urge to go drink yourself into oblivion, or whether it's just a mild frustration, it's still thought brought to life in the moment, and it's still going to go away. Doesn't matter what it is, and I still need to be reminded of that. And I think a lot of people know that in some level, but they need to be reminded regularly. And that's why I just love about these conversations. It's just human to human kind of reminding each other, it's really pretty simple. This is really all it is. Even when it looks like way more, this is all it ever is. Thought brought to life. We feel it. We might act on it. We might not. And then it goes away. And even when we act on it, even when we get caught up in habits like I was, and like so many people are, it still goes away. You still see your way at some point. You might not see it in the timing that you would like, but there's that safety net is there. There's such that momentum toward clarity and toward evolving and all of that I think so many people, do just catch on to, and we eventually find our way. And I just think it's it's just really, really cool to witness. So yeah, I mean, time goes by quickly. I could probably go on forever, but let's see if there are any questions or thoughts, and then I can talk more if not.
Yeah, I didn't say this in the beginning, but if you do have any questions, there's a Q&A box on the right-hand side if you're on Google+, and you can type in your questions. And a couple things came to mind as you were talking. One is that we frequently consider our habits as, drinking problem and eating problem, physical and over-exercising. But it occurred to me when you were talking, it can also be something like what we might call an anger management issue, because that's thoughts that we're hanging on to. And so anyway, I just wanted to say that because, we frequently don't, at least I didn't, consider that a habit. But one of the things that really struck me when I read your book was my big insight from it was that habits are a sign of our well-being. Do you want to talk to that a little bit?
Sure. Well, first, let me say about the first thing, yeah, about habits, everything being a habit. That's some of the best feedback. And that was a little bit of an insight for me, actually, even afterwards, to kind of hear this. Some of the best feedback I've had from so many people that say, oh my gosh, reading that book, I thought this was my habit. Like you said, some of the common ones that we're all aware of. I thought I was just trying to quit smoking. And then I realized that the way that I distract myself when my partner's talking with me is my habit. The way that I get quiet when I'm out in public is also a habit. The way that my thinking goes to, what's going to happen today, what's on the agenda for next week, that's a habit. And so, I think most of our life is habitual, right? Like if our whole life and our whole experience is thought, it's just what's going on, what's kind of coming up, showing up through us in any given moment. That's our entire experience of life. And, I don't know how accurate the stats are, but we've all heard the stats that we have, like, our thoughts overlap. We have like this, like 90% of the same thoughts today that we had yesterday, or whatever that stat is, however accurate or inaccurate it might be. That certainly feels that way sometimes, that we tend to think and see things in a similar way and just replay that, and seeing that down to that level. That's habitual, that's habit. And that's, again, it operates in the same way. That's our in brain terms, it's our mind being efficient, our brain being efficient, that machine that is our brain, just kind of giving us the same stuff, and really giving us the stuff that we've paid attention to in the past, that's brought out an emotional reaction. The brain just kind of notes those things and say, ooh, this made her feel good earlier. Let's give her more of this. Or she seems to think this a lot, or he seems to go down that path a lot. We'll keep doing that. That's kind of the way that I think about the brain operating in that way. And again, for us in our wisdom to see, oh, there's a machine in my head that just does that because it just likes to be efficient and it doesn't see the big picture all the time. Just knowing that kind of knocks us out of that little tiny box, and opens us up to, wow, my brain might be saying this, but anything is possible. And then you're in that place where new thought, comes through, or can come through all the time. So I love that. And I think that's just it really surprised me in a way, but it's really, really cool to see that people are seeing that they have habits all over the place, down to the level of just thinking, because that really is like the habit for everyone. And that's all a habit or addiction is. That's all even like a drinking habit is, or a behavioral habit is us taking our thinking seriously. We're really kind of addicted to thought. So yeah, in terms of habits being kind of a sign of our well-being, a lot of my conversations with Bill Pettit were really helpful in helping me see this, and he helped to point this out to me in a lot of ways. That when our mind goes in that habitual kind of common direction. So I think of it like when I was binge eating, it felt like I would just be going about my day, and suddenly, bam, I was like overwhelmed with all this thought. And the thought was very emotional, very physical thought. So suddenly I was kind of, okay, I feel horrible. The urge is back. It's back. The monster's here. I need to do something to quiet it down. And so I had this go-to way to quiet it down. And the thing about habits is that the reason I think they're so sticky and we get so caught up in them is because they're effective in the short term. Like, they're very effective. When I was having this huge urge to binge eat, as soon as I would even just think about, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to drive to the store and buy a bunch of junk. Just the thought and just the driving to the store would help a little bit. And certainly as soon as I started eating, it helped instantly. So, I wouldn't say I was at home base when I would start eating, but it certainly took the sting, it kind of numbed and died down all of that thinking that I was feeling beforehand. So they do work. They're excellent short-term strategies for helping us feel better. And what that does in your brain, again, is just to think about it in brain terms. Your lower brain is kind of like, ooh, this works. Your lower brain just loves you, just wants you to feel good. It's a really, really well-meaning machine. It's just not all that wise all the time, but it's smart and it remembers. This is what makes her feel good. So every time you do that, it just kind of reinforces that. But to go from seeing, oh my God, I have this horrible problem. What's wrong with me? I'm disgusting. This is so shameful. I can't believe I do this. I know better, which is a big one. I know better. Why do I keep doing this? I must hate myself because I know better. Why else would I do this? to go from seeing it like that to seeing it like, I'm just doing the best I can in that moment to help myself feel better. And yes, I know better, but in that moment, when I'm like in the basement of the elevator and I just can't see many options, the best option I can see is to eat. It's just, we do the best we can with what we can see in that moment. And the best thing I could do in that moment was to just do it and get it over with. And I knew I would at least get up to like floor 1 or 2 by doing that. And that was helpful. So I really have kind of come to see that as my wisdom, doing, wisdom working through me in the best way it could, given my cloudy head, given the limitations of my understanding at that time. Wisdom was trying so hard to help me, and it did help me. It got me up a little bit. And then as this is true for everyone, like as people start to have more of an understanding of how that works, we just see better. I don't know if it's that I didn't quite get down to the basement after that, so it was easier, or if I got to the basement, but wisdom kind of, I don't know, it just came in and helped me more. But there's something about, when we just through this understanding, it's like our consciousness raises a little bit. And I think more options are available. And that's where that space is, where it starts to occur to you, oh, I feel bad. I could do this. There's a pull to do this, but maybe I don't have to. Like, maybe this will go away. Maybe there's another option, and then it just kind of tends to rise up and up from there. But I think the big, really helpful thing in your question, and in that whole point of seeing that these habits are helpful, is just that it takes so much of the pressure and the judgment of ourselves and all of that off the table. Because when we can see that we're just doing the best we can from the thinking we have in that moment. If you're in the basement and the lights are off, you're just not going to see many options. But once you come to understand and you hang out more on the second story, the second floor, you just see more options. And then you understand more and you see more options. That's all this is. It's never that we hate ourselves. It's never that we want to be here or that we should know better. Everyone knows better. Everyone knows if you want to quit drinking, if you want to stop having a drinking problem, you stop drinking. There's no one on the face of the earth that doesn't know that. But you have to feel it, you have to kind of have that insight and that shift.
Yeah, something that occurred to me as you were talking is as my understanding deepens about where this comes from and that thoughts will pass, they're not permanent, is how the way that I relate to my thoughts helps to alleviate those, helps me to disconnect from the repetitive attachment that I would have to thoughts that would cause the habit. So
yeah,
there is actually a question also.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll just, I can see it, so I'll just read it. I've had a problem with gambling. I do it when I'm bored and frustrated and at work where I hate my job. I feel it makes me feel alive, but then I lose and feel terrible. So this really kind of speaks to, like, in a sense, you can see it in here, I think, in this question, what we were just saying, how our habits can be our wisdom coming through, trying to help us, not in a great way. So like the person asking the question notes, it feels really good for a minute. He's feeling some discomfort, doesn't like his job, feeling frustrated, having all that there. And the thought comes in, oh, why don't you gamble? That'll feel better. And it does for a minute until he loses, and then he feels worse, And so I think just that is kind of what it, like that, again, I think it's probably familiar to a lot of people, but just to see how that cycle works, and you can see our wisdom in it. You can see our wisdom, and you can see how the brain is just trying to help us. But then it's not a great long-term strategy. So I think kind of in that, looking at the feelings that are coming up that lead you to want to gamble, there's lots of pieces of this that you can kind of dissect and look at. But for you to note, that when you're feeling bored and frustrated, that's when your mind starts scrambling and brings up this idea for you. And this idea, from that state of mind, And only from that state of mind, it kind of looks like a good idea. Or maybe you know it's not a good idea, but the feeling, the uncomfortable feelings are such that you just want to do it anyway because you just want to feel better. And I think a huge piece of this, was seeing if we could all, not be afraid of our experience, that alone would change the world. That whatever it is that's going on when you're sitting at work or when you're feeling frustrated or feeling bored, like seeing that in a new way, knowing that is as uncomfortable as it might feel. I mean, that is thought brought to life, comes up, crashes on the shore, goes back to its source. That's all it ever is. And our mind doesn't like it being that simple. So our mind wants to say, you hate your job, they don't treat you well here. You deserve to gamble. You deserve to do this. Give yourself a break, or it's this fault or this person's fault or this thing's fault. That's what our mind will do to try to make sense of the feeling. But it's so much simpler than that. You have some thought, it's brought to life. You feel it as boredom, frustration, whatever, and then it goes away. And being able to just kind of hang out in that feeling and not hang out in the feeling, wallowing in it. That's what I think, pretty much everything before this kind of does to help habits and addictions, is it's kind of like the white knuckling method, the willpower method, the discipline. Oh, just feel that stuff and just say, no, I'm not going to gamble. I'm not going to do it, and eventually it starts to go away. And that may be true sometimes. I mean, certainly people have ended habits through willpower and discipline, no question, and through white knuckling their way through it. Because your brain does see, if you don't keep gambling, you don't keep doing the thing, your brain's going to eventually give up the fight. But man, it doesn't have to be that hard. Like that still is just a lot of it's sitting in a totally safe feeling and not experiencing it as safe. And that's okay too. I mean, we're all there sometimes, but the more you can kind of know this agitation I'm feeling building, that's sending my little lower brain off, trying to find a solution for me, which happens to be the habit. This agitation itself is just a temporary feeling. It's passing through. It's thought brought to life. And when you just kind of are able to sit with that and let it go, the more you do that and the more you see about it, I think your brain stops giving you that as a solution. Or it keeps giving you that as a solution, but you know better about that too. You don't need it. You don't need that quick fix. You can be in the feeling. And so, it kind of starts to die out that way. So I think it's interesting, as I say this, it's almost, it is about the insight. It is like everything that we talk about here on these webinars, it is about seeing something that we didn't see before, seeing it at a different level. And at the same time, sometimes it's a little bit of practice. As you're seeing things, you hang out in it and you test it, and you do it kind of knowing, all right, I'm doing the best I can. I'm feeling this out and I'm just going to do the best I can. And so, and I think with some of the people I work with, it's really nice to kind of know that that's okay. So it's not that you have to sit around and wait for some big insight to hit you, which is a common misunderstanding about what the principles is about. It's not about that at all. I don't think anyway, in my understanding, it's, you keep looking, you look toward the truth, you know the simple truth of it, and you hang out there, and you do whatever occurs to you from that place, and better things will occur to you. And sometimes it does feel a little bit like you're testing it out. Maybe Thursday you get a little bored at work, but you don't gamble, or you push it off a little bit. Maybe you try your best to not, but by the end of the day you do, and it's okay. You let the slate wipe clear and you go back at it Friday and see what you can see. Always looking toward the truth of what's happening. And it does get easier. That's the cool thing I think to appreciate too about this understanding, and also about the machine that is the brain, is that because our brain is a really smart machine that picks up on things, it changes for us in a good ways kind of quickly too. So as soon as you stop feeding that lower brain, as soon as you stop kind of feeding that habit, it takes note. And sometimes it comes at you a little stronger, saying, are you sure you want to get rid of me? Are you sure you don't want my suggestions anymore? Sometimes that happens. But when you hold hold firm, and no, I see what you are and I don't need that. I'm going to hang out with my wisdom. I don't need this. It catches on. It's so awesome. And it's amazing that just, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, maybe we didn't know that about the brain. I mean, 20 years ago, I think people still thought brain's pretty much cooked. By the time you're, I don't know, 7, 8, 10, however old it was, your brain's cooked. It's not going to change much. And now we see just recently in all of our lifetimes, that's not true. The brain is so plastic and it's so responsive to our understanding. So when we see it for what it is and we're not constantly feeding it, it will change and it will meet us where we are. And that's a really cool thing to get to experience, and I think that gives people a lot of hope and a lot of excitement in this as well, that, wow, this gets easier. Like the less I fall for all of, this chatter in my head, the quieter it gets in there and the easier it gets. So I hope that's helpful. If you have any follow-up questions, or if I didn't really address it, just feel free to pop them in there.
Something occurred to me when you were talking about it, and I'll use the gambling just because that was with the question, but I think we, as humans, we tend to identify with the thoughts of our habits. So we start to see that we're gambling more, and then we have the thought, I'm a gambler, and we take it very, very personally. And then we strengthen it more, and it keeps coming like round and round. And like for me, this understanding really helped me to see that's really an impersonal thought.
Yeah.
And I don't have to believe it and attach to it.
Yeah.
And that
I think that's huge.
Go. Yeah.
That's huge. And it's something, again, that just in brain terms, it's very impersonal too. Like your brain's just a machine. Like I use the alarm clock analogy a lot for how the brain works. Like you set your alarm for 6 o'clock and your alarm goes off. I mean, it's not out to get you. You told it to do that. It's a machine doing what it was just kind of taught innocently, taught to do. And so I love that way of thinking of just even in brain terms, it's so not personal, but so much bigger with this bigger understanding of principles and how that powers everything. That's like, yeah, it's not about us. I mean, we're just a tiny little thinking speck in the universe that thinks everything's about us, but it's never about us. It's just operating in us the same way it operates in everyone. And especially with habits and addictions and things that there's a lot of shame around, a lot of confusion around. I think that's just so huge for people to see that you're not in this because you're weak or because of some damage in you. It's not that personal. There's a rhyme and reason to it. It's just a simple misunderstanding of what we're getting, of what's arising within us. When we understand it, we still feel it, but it affects us a little differently. When we don't understand it, I mean, it just kind of takes us over. Yeah, the personal, it not being personal piece is really, really big in all this. And I think it's just big in all of life. Like, again, just like kind of seeing that humility in this understanding is so helpful and so nice. I've heard so many people just in the past couple weeks just kind of randomly comment on that, how nice it is to just be normal, just be a normal human being, and when we're focused on this big problem that looks like us and we should be better and we should overcome it, it's really hard to just enjoy being a normal human being.
It just makes me think about many habit recovery programs. Instead of teaching that it's an impersonal thought and not to identify with that object, like I'm a gambler or whatever it is, really encourages people to identify being that. And it just occurred to me that constant identifying is really what causes that white knuckling. I have to stop because this is what I am.
Yes. Definitely. That's a great point. it reminds me, I just recently heard something on, and again, I didn't, I don't know for sure if this is accurate, but it's just what I heard, that apparently like the founder of the 12-step programs, like the early people in putting together, AA and all the 12-step programs, didn't necessarily view it as a disease, didn't necessarily view, because the whole model there is like this disease kind of model, addiction as a disease, that along the way, at some point in there, I don't know that it's a disease, that we want to think about it that way, but they went with that way of talking about it because what that did for people was help them almost equate it to like a cold. Like, I'm not my cold right now, so it's not even, actually, as we talk, it's not affecting me at all. Before we talked, it was on my mind and it was affecting me. Now, it's like, I'm not this cold, my mind's not on it, so it's almost not even an issue. And I can definitely see that, see the benefit in that, because it's what you're speaking to. I'm not this habit. Like, this is just something that's there in me. So I thought that was so cool to hear, that maybe it kind of changed through the years. And I think a lot of people kind of hear that in a not helpful way. It's a disease, which means it has power over me. But there's another way of hearing it, which is, it's not me. It's not my fault, and that's helpful.
Wow. I've never heard that before. That's a great insight. Yeah. And, that you have a response. I don't know if you see it.
I'm sure you're just as normal as the rest of us, Trevor, or not normal as the rest of us.
So we have about 10 minutes left, and I just wanted to check in and see if there's anything that you want to close with, wrap up with, any other additional points you want to talk about. There's another question that just popped up. Can you see the question?
No, I can't actually. I just, yeah.
It says the label has, oh, you see it? Okay.
Yeah. So the label is stuck, and now the harder I try to abstain, the more effort, and in a way, the focus is on the gambling, when I feel the core thing is to live a life I enjoy. When I get quiet, I see this. Yeah. Well, I mean, just even that, when I get quiet, I see this. Like, I know it's too simple to be true, but it really is. Like, when it feels like we have a problem, when it feels like the problem is us, when we're trying really hard, all that is just kind of showing us we're really kind of going about it in our heads. I just think, it doesn't mean that it's always going to be easy, but that feeling of, oh, this is me, this is a burden. Like, if even just intellectually, like, you just kind of know, no, I wasn't really born this way. This isn't a fundamental flaw of me. If you can see it in someone else, if you can see someone else with a habit or addiction and see that that's not them, it's harder to see in ourselves, but it's usually pretty easy to see in other people that you care about. You see, they're just caught up in this cycle. They're just caught up in some thinking, that's not who they are. And the same is true of you. The same is true of everyone. You're no exception. You're not special in that regard. Like, you're just as innocent as everyone. So kind of, no, I think noticing by that feeling, the more lost and stuck and confused we feel, all that's showing us is that we're just kind of in our heads trying to figure it out. And when we get quiet, it gets clearer. And that's about as simple as it gets. And that's always the case, so kind of stepping back from that, figuring it out, and just letting the quiet come, and knowing that there are answers in that quiet. I just heard somebody, a colleague of mine, says it a really cool way. I can't remember exactly, but something like, the parts of you that need healing will heal when you stop doing and thinking. Like, as soon as we're quiet, any part of you that needs fixing, healing, that just needs to feel better, that needs to see something, that just comes out when we get quiet. That's just the design of it, and And even in that, I know it's easy to think about and to look back and say, no, well, last week when I needed an answer to this question, I got quiet and I didn't get my answer. We can argue with anything, but it's just the way human beings operate. When we get quiet, stuff eventually comes through. And it always has, and it always will. So I think, again, like that being one of those simple truths that we can just hang your hat on, that you can just know that's the way it works, is going to be super helpful. Because when we start spinning our wheels, as we all do, trying to hurry up and fix ourselves, you note that feeling. You notice that feeling is so not home base, and you can just step back and let things clear. And that's, so we're talking about it kind of in the big picture of the help you might get for your habit, or what you decide to do, go into therapy or go this route or go that route. But that's all we ever do in any little moment either. When you're sitting at your desk feeling bored and hating your job and feeling that urge to gamble, it's the exact same thing then too. You just, you feel that feeling and this isn't home base. This is a lot of thought showing up. Let me just hang out and wait for that to clear. And when it clears, I'll know better. I'll do something different, or you'll do whatever you do, but you'll definitely see differently from a clear mind. So just get quiet, everyone. Just live in a quiet mind, and it really does. I don't know. It has a way of just pointing us in the right direction all the time. Yeah, bring on home base. Exactly. And home base, remember, it's there. It can't possibly leave you. We're just thinking over it. Like you're sitting on home base this very instant as you type that. You're sitting on home base. We all are. We can't budge from it. We're just looking somewhere else, and we're just thinking over it, and again, when all that thought quiets down, we're just right back there. Just had this image lately of a magnet. Like there's I don't know, home base, as if it's this place, and then there's like a magnet on your butt that just takes you back to home base. And all you have to do is kind of stop getting in the way. When you just relax, that magnet just sucks you right back there. It's just nice to know that, isn't it? I mean, we can feel like we've been far away from home base for years, and it's just cool to know that it's still going to find you at some point. You're still just sitting on it. You're just not seeing that you're sitting on it. So yeah, I don't know if there are no other questions. I mean, I could just kind of wrap up, I guess, by one of the things that I just love to share with people around this is just how much hope there is. It's never there's nothing. For a long time, it didn't look that way to me. It looked, and I knew I was a hard worker. So I figured I'd probably find my way out of my habit, because I was going to go to the ends of the earth to dig my way out, because I just figured that's what it took. All right, well, at least I'm a hard worker. I have some resources. Unlike a lot of poor people that maybe don't have that kind of motivation, at least I had that going for me. So I'm I'll just scratch and dig and work really hard, and I'll find a way out of this. And it doesn't have to be like that, kind of knowing that it's almost the opposite. In hindsight, you can see, when you've kind of just seen your way to the other side of something like this, you can kind of look back and see how all that digging and scratching really was kind of making it worse in some ways, or at least keeping you in that mindset of, this is me, I have this problem, I have to find a way out, which again has almost like a flavor of hope to it. It's almost this false, yeah, I'm going to think my way out of this. But it certainly wasn't freedom. It wasn't anything near freedom, and it wasn't relief. It was resolve and hope, which is better than hopelessness. But that's not really, we can do a lot better. So I think the freedom, the real freedom, the relief, that's the safety that's ours, that's possible for everyone, is just so wonderful to see. That the less we dig and scratch, and the less we call these problems ours, the less we call thought ours, the less that, thought comes up and we think it's us and think that we put it there or that it has something to do with us, the more freedom we just naturally start to feel. And there's so much hope. It doesn't matter how long we've been caught up in this stuff. I mean, we've all been caught up in it for as long as we're alive, right? Because we've been thinking from the minute we're born, and we're all addicted to our own thoughts to some degree or another. So we've all had lifelong addiction to thought. And you may never be fully like on the wagon where you are at a place where you never believe any of your own thoughts. I mean, I don't think that's possible, but it doesn't matter. Like we can all still have that relationship, like you said, Bonnie, like have that relationship with our own thinking that just feels safe and okay, and to where that's just the physical thing that's showing up in the world, but I don't have to take that. So that's just that wave. I don't have to take that so seriously, because in a second, the wind's going to shift and the current's going to take that back out, and I'm going to get a different wave. And the less we hang on those waves and call them ours, the better off we all are.
Yeah, I love that. The thought of it being hopeful, like this understanding really causes a lot of hope. Thank you so much, Amy.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and so everyone, the next 3PGC conference is going to be in October. It's Thursday, October 27th through Sunday, October 30th, and it's in the Los Angeles area. And you can you can find the website. I'm sorry, I don't have the website written down right now, but you can find more at 3pgc.org. And the next webinar is on March 22nd. It's with Erica Bugby. And just before this, I got the email with her title, which I have to read because I think it's so great. It's How the Mind is Like a Self-Cleaning Oven, and Why Your Hard Work Isn't Working and Leaves You Exhausted. So that's on March 22nd. And then on April 14th, Barbara Patterson will be on the webinar. So I hope you can all join us then. And thanks, Amy.
Yeah, thank you.